The Dead Boys' Young, Loud, and Snotty is the debut album from one of punk's earliest and best bands. Comprised of members of the influential Cleveland proto-punk group, Rocket from the Tombs, the Dead Boys caught the wave of hard and fast rock and roll at the right time, as they often appeared alongside other early punk stalwarts, the Ramones, at punk's unofficial birthplace, CBGB's in New York. After having moved to the city from Cleveland at the urging of that group's lead singer, Joey Ramone, the Dead Boys came to be one of the most erratic live bands ever. Thus, Young, Loud, and Snotty is quite an apt description for a debut album of studio songs from the band. With Steve Baders out front, the Dead Boys had quite the voice and look. Red-headed lead guitarist Cheetah Chrome channeled an American Johnny Rotten persona. Meanwhile, as Johnny Blitz pounded away on the drums, Jeff Magnum plodded along on the bass, and Jimmy Zero kept it all together on the rhythm guitar. The album's opening song, Sonic Reducer, interestingly enough, was written while Cheetah Chrome and Johnny Blitz were in Rocket from the Tombs, the aforementioned proto-punk outfit that predated the Dead Boys by a few years. Although not as raw as their former band's version, the Dead Boys version is better produced. However, this doesn't always equate to a better version, which is the case here. The opening guitar strums are drowned out by an unnecessary synthy reverberation that sounds better suited for the music of the Cars. Also lacking is the first guitar solo, which had a heavy blues edge. Sticking to the down-stricken power chords of Anew, the Dead Boys were onto something, however, so not all was lost. The second track, All This and More, veers far from the opening tune though. Instead of a basic punk song, we get a power pop number that showcases the band's songwriting depth. Vader sounds like Iggy Pop slurring after a night out, which has proven to be influential. Never before had Iggy Pop and the early power pop melodies and instrumentation of Big Star sounded so good together. The mixing and mashing of styles helps to make All This and More stick out. Think of it as an American counterpart to the kind of power pop and punk mashup that Northern Irish group, the Undertones, were doing with their hit Teenage Kicks. The third track, What Love Is pretty unmemorable, except for some great harmony vocals that sound shockingly like Van Halen at the end of the measure. It's another wild card on the album, but if the first few tracks are any indication, we can expect more. And you guessed it, more is what we get. The fourth track, Not Anymore, is a sad ballad of sorts, in the vein of what later CBGB pals, Johnny Thunders and the Heartbreakers, were doing on some of their songs. Following Not Anymore is the song, Ain't Nothing to Do, which is more in that punk rock vein of a 3-chord sonic attack. Later covered by one of grunge's first bands and Madoni precursors, Green River, we can't lie but admit that we prefer the grunge band's version better. Still, the Dead Boys wrote the tune, which adds to their reputation as underrated songwriters of punk's first wave. The first song of any dull nature appears next, unfortunately, which is the obscene, Caught with the Meat in Your Mouth. The lyrics are full of downright unheard of behavior for the time, but we can't say the instrumentation is anything noteworthy. There's no hook in the melody, which is what a good punk song must have. Similarly boring is follow-up, Hey Little Girl, a cover of the 60s garage rock standard by the Syndicate of Sound. The album's liner notes reveal it to be the only song recorded live, and at CBGB's, interestingly enough. It's a shame that we couldn't get a better song to showcase their explosive nature on stage. I Need Lunch, meanwhile, builds up the intensity again with palm muting and open chords. It shares the similar raunchy subject matter of previous numbers, but the instrumentation and vocal delivery is a lot more interesting than those of prior. Vader starts out sounding like Mick Jagger, before belting like an even angrier David Johansen of the New York Dolls. His vocal style would later go on to influence the raspy strain of a singer like Paul Westerberg of 80s power pop and punk rock group, The Replacements, with this song being a good basis for what that group sounded like early on. With 3 songs to go and 9th on the track listing, High Tension Wire features a great hook and some great guitar work from both Cheetah Chrome and Jimmy Zero. More so, the tone of their instruments on 10th track, Down in Flames, is the most proto-punk-like of all their output. It has that gritty and swinging electric blues backbeat before going experimental and noisy during the second half, before culminating in a return to the hook of the intro. Finishing off the album is a medley of the previous tunes, Not Anymore and Ain't Nothing to Do. There's nothing all that unique about these versions, which are just alternate versions of their predecessors, save for some studio banter and harmonizing vocals that would otherwise not appear during the solo. It's an ending of filler, but it doesn't affect how the entire album should be viewed. Young, Loud, and Snotty in all its glory is about as good as an inception to the first wave of punk as any. Crazier than the Sex Pistols and more diverse than the Ramones, the Dead Boys were vital to the true grime and grit of rock and roll's evolution, as evidenced here. We give this album an 8.5 out of 10. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more reviews on great music in the future, be sure to hit that subscribe button. Thanks for watching.